Hello and welcome to Farm Connections. I'm your host, Dan Hoffman. On today's show, we visit Pam Benike at Prairie Hollow Farm and discuss the value of diversifying your farming practices. We attend a return on investment event put on by the University of Minnesota Extension in Owatonna. Brad Carlson presents this week's Best Practices segment, and we have a new focus on 4-H, all here today on Farm Connections.
Welcome to Farm Connections with your host, Dan Hoffman.
Programming made possible by Alcorn Clean Fuel, a farmer-owned renewable energy producer in Claremont, Minnesota. For more than 20 years, producing ethanol, high-protein livestock feed, and corn oil for resale to benefit its members and their communities. Absolute Energy, a locally owned facility, produces 115 million gallons of ethanol annually, proudly supporting local economies in Iowa and Minnesota. Absolute Energy, adding value to the neighborhood.
Back in 1944, Sam Bauer had a vision to provide tires and heating oil to families. This second and third generation family-run business is still focused on commercial truck, retread tires, tires for your passenger vehicles, and farm equipment too.
Novel Energy Solutions, committed to working with farmers and landowners to deliver a new crop, electricity. More about income potential and lease agreements designed to be top performers at novelenergy.biz.
Welcome to Farm Connections. We traveled to Elgin, Minnesota to talk to Pam about Prairie Hollow Farm. Pam Benike, welcome to Farm Connections.
And welcome to Prairie Hollow Farm.
Thanks for having us. Well, what's happening here and how did it get started?
It started out with my great-grandfather, who passed it to my grandmother, who passed it to my dad, who passed it to me. My son will be the next generation of managers, but I have a daughter that's involved in the farming operation also. And then I've got grandchildren running around, and I think 4-year-old Faith will probably be a very strong contender for that generation of operating the farm. And she's 4, but she already can tell you how to do everything on the farm.
Generation 6 is already here.
Yes.
Awesome. So when you talked about passing down the farm, that brings up interesting questions sometimes about how do we do that without giving it all away to taxation and other things? You must have had some planning in that. There
was a lot of planning in this, and right now the farm is in a trust. And so it can pass from generation to generation without a lot of taxation issues that, in the past have quite often caused one generation to lose the farm because they couldn't pay the taxes.
So somebody must have trusted you a lot to say, you're the person that's going to carry this farm forward. Tell us about that.
Well, my dad, when my dad was diagnosed with cancer, I was actually farming on what had been my mom's parents' farm. And when Dad was diagnosed with cancer, then he asked me to come back and take over here. And so I did. And Dad was a conventional farmer, and so everything here, everything that you see back here was, other than the steep slopes, but everything had been in crops. And so I came back, transitioned everything to organic and to grass. So those cows that are back there are all out on paddocks. Those pastures are all divided up into small paddocks so that they basically have a day's worth of grass in each paddock, and then they get moved to another one. And so they're always on fresh grass. They're always meeting, a very high nutritional standard that way. And but it's been a process, because when you take a farm that's been primarily in crops and transition it into grass, there's a lot of chemical residue in the soil. So it took a long time to get that all out so that it would grow the beautiful grass that you see back there now.
And you had a lot of fence building to do.
A lot of fence building, yes.
So are you certified organic at this point?
I am not certified organic. I was at one time, but I found that I really don't need that certification for the customers that I sell to. They are more concerned about having a relationship with this farm. And our customers are primarily farmers markets, CSA customers, restaurants. We do market to the Head Start program in Rochester as well. But they are more concerned about having that conversation and finding out how we do things and understanding who we are and what we are all about.
And you referenced CSA. Can you elaborate on that acronym?
Okay, CSA stands for Community Supported Agriculture. There's many different ways that that can be done. Here we offer two options, a summer CSA and a winter CSA. And the summer CSA is a box of whatever vegetables are ready, or they can choose a cheese share, a bread share, an egg share, a beef share, a pork share. Whatever they would prefer to have in that box every week. And then they pay part of the fee up front and the rest of it during the season. And whatever's ready is what they end up with.
Do you raise all of those animals?
Yes.
That's pretty amazing. So you're really truly diversified.
We are. My grandfather used to say that you had to have 7 income streams in order to make a farm work. And so, and that was what he had learned at the University of Minnesota way back when. And then Dad took over, and he was also a university graduate. And at that time they were saying, no, you need to focus on one thing and be really efficient. And so he went with the dairy and did it well, but he did one thing. And well, dairy prices, you know, are up and down and up and down, and lately more down than up. And so when I started farming, I actually moved away from here and followed Grandpa's practices more than Dad's. And so I started moving back toward that diversification.
Pam, you talked a little bit about 7 streams of income. How many on your farm?
I think we're up to 9 now.
So let's start with the first one. As you came back to the farm, what did you do, and then how did you transition to something different?
The first thing, well, I had already been making cheese on the other farm. So I moved that entire cheese making operation here. And so we started with that, and then we added the beef, because that's just, you know, you end up with the dairy steers. And then we added some beef calves because we had extra milk. And so that seemed to be a no-brainer. But then we wanted to get back. I'd been doing some CSA on the other farm, and we wanted to get back to that. But we had to get some land ready for that kind of growing again. So it took us about 3 years to get back to actually growing the vegetables again.
So we've got cheese.
So we've got the cheese, we've got beef, we've got pork, we've got eggs, we've got bread, we've got both the fruits and the vegetables. And then we also have, I guess what we would call event, because people come out and want to do an on-farm meal or something to that effect.
And the bread is whole grain?
So I grow an old heirloom variety of wheat. I've actually grown it, saved seed, replanted enough years that it's considered a landrace wheat now, so it's mine.
How about sweeteners?
Honey. We have bees, and so we have our own honey that we use in the breads.
Pam, you spoke earlier about weaving the old with the new. What did you mean?
So I like to think that we use old methods and apply new technologies. So in our hoop houses, we've got 3 hoop houses that we grow in all winter long. And we don't add any heat. And people told me that could not be done. And I said, yes, it can. This is just basic physics. We can do this. And I remember my grandpa talking about greenhouses that they built back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, that were just simply a covering over, so they would dig trenches and put manure in those trenches, so it would, as it broke down, it would release heat. And they were actually able to grow things like roses in the wintertime in Minnesota because that generated enough heat. Well, as I started doing the math, and like I say, it's just basic physics. If you have a greenhouse that's 30 feet wide and 90 feet long, you've got enough land there to hold enough heat to get through even the most severe Minnesota winter night. It gets a little tricky if you get 4 days in a row without any sunshine. But usually, if you have days without sunshine, you also have warmer temperatures. Usually your super cold days are also brightly sunny. So on those brightly sunny days, in the greenhouses, which are just basically a metal frame covered with 2 layers of poly, just plastic, And we inflate those with a little fan. But that's in between the two layers, yeah. So it's kind of like a little balloon. That will hold enough heat. So during the day, it's about 75 degrees in there, 75 to 80 degrees. We'll have days in January when it's maybe 10 below outside, and we've got the doors wide open to let out excess heat, because it can get up to 90 if you've got full sun in January. And but that warms up the soil enough so that the soil temperatures stay right around 50 degrees all winter. And then at night, we pull blankets over the top of the plants so that that heat stays right down on the ground where the plants are at.
You build an envelope, so to speak.
Yep, it just holds the heat right there. So if you've got severe winds and the top part gets real cold, those plants are nice and cozy down there next to the ground.
And how about orientation to the sun? Do you run yours north-south, east-west?
I run mine east-west, and the slope, I use a Gothic style. So the slope is just right, so we get very little what we call sun bounce in the wintertime, because you want the sun to hit at the right angle where it will penetrate and not bounce off.
And those products are sold or mostly for the home consumption?
Those go to the winter farmers markets. And so we walk into the farmers markets in January with a full table of greens, which is pretty awesome.
Pam, you seem like you're an awful lot about local.
I am.
What about energy needs?
Well, that was always an issue for us. But my dad planned ahead. He built this big shed years ago, back when solar was still expensive. And solar panels were heavy then. So he built this shed with these massive beams in it. And I now use it for hay storage, which is, you know, part of what it was intended for. But he had always planned that the south side of that was angled just right for solar panels. And so this year, even though Dad's not here, his dream comes true this year, because we covered it with solar panels. And so we will be generating about 70% of our own energy needs right here on the farm.
Nice. So I've heard about economics, agronomy, nature, carbon footprint was even put in there, right?
Well, I guess I can't say that that's part of what every farmer does, but it's all part of what we do here.
Fascinating story. Thank you so much, Pam.
Thanks.
Stay tuned for more on Farm Connections.
Farm Connections Best Practices, brought to you by
I'm Brad Carlson, Extension Educator with the University of Minnesota Extension. Welcome to today's Best Practices segment. Today we're going to talk about side dress nitrogen. There's been a real trend towards using side dress applications for nitrogen in corn the last several years. There's a lot of things you need to know about it, though, if you're going to do it correctly. First and foremost is a little bit on the necessity of it. To an extent, most sites don't respond to side dress nitrogen. The concept with side dress is that we think there's a chance we're going to lose nitrogen between the time we apply it and the time the crop really needs it. Corn kicks into its rapid growth phase somewhere around V4 or V6, usually occurring about the middle of June. And at that point, we want most of our nitrogen applied. So the theory with side dress is that if we apply all our nitrogen in the fall before, or the spring before we plant, that potentially we're going to lose some of that nitrogen. And so we're better off applying a small amount and then saving the rest to apply in season. In most sites, actually, we don't have a lot of risk of loss. And so we're going to find that the sites that have coarse textured soils, sites that are poorly drained, are going to be much more responsive to side dress nitrogen. At this time in the season, though, if you're going to side dress, you've probably already made that decision. So the question then is, what forms of nitrogen do I use, and what's the best way to apply it? A lot of this side dress nitrogen is actually top dressed as urea, spin spreader right over the top. In a lot of cases, it's simply left lay on the surface. This is okay because on average we get a fair amount of precipitation this time of year, and that will work the nitrogen into the soil. In most cases, though, you do want to probably think about using a urease inhibitor on the urea just to prevent the chance of loss to volatilization. It's also important to remember that the concept of split application really refers to using a base rate of nitrogen where we just simply are applying part of it pre-plant and part of it in season. The concept of using a split application for variable rate nitrogen is really something else, because we want to use that extra time to gather more information to make a rate decision, as is the concept of a rescue treatment where we think we've lost some nitrogen because it's been too wet. In general, our research has shown in Minnesota that we don't see a big response in corn if we apply much later than the V12 stage. And so if you're getting towards that silking period of time, it's really getting to be about too late. There has been some research nationally that has shown advantages to this, but a lot of that has been done farther south with much longer season corn hybrids than we grow in Minnesota, as well as under soil conditions with significantly less organic matter. And so we don't see that kind of responsiveness to a side dress application late in the season. Using a planned side dress application is a fine way to manage your nitrogen. You just simply need to consider a few more factors when you do it. I'm Brad Carlson, Extension Educator with the University of Minnesota Extension. This has been our Best Practices segment. Thanks for watching.
Strategic Farming Workshops, Return on Investment. What a great concept. And with us is Lisa Benike. Lisa,
hi.
Welcome. Welcome to Farm Connections, and thanks for being part of this workshop.
You're welcome.
Return on investment. Tell us more.
I think what we're really trying to get farmers to do is go back and think of all the inputs that they're putting in their crop, which one of them truly pay, and give them a return on their investment. So I am willing to go spend money, whether it's $10 an acre, $20 an acre, whatever that is, and I as a farmer should have an expectation that I not only break even, get my $20 back, but I make a return on my investment. So I make $22 on that $20 investment. If I have an investment that only makes me $18 back, maybe I shouldn't do that. And so we're trying to help kind of break through all of that information to help the farmer make a better decision as to which investments I should actually make, and maybe some that I shouldn't make.
Well, that's important, and you work for the University of Minnesota as an extension educator, but you also farm, correct?
I do. So my husband and I farm. We have 160 acres on the home farm, and we raise corn and soybeans. We have dairy cattle that we feed out. So I do get to implement some of my, practice what you preach, or put your money where your mouth is. So I do try and implement some of those things on our farm as well. So as I'm talking to people, you have some life experience both on the job and at home.
Well, it's authentic. If you're farming, you can verify it, that you're actually true blue. You talked a little bit about randomization. You also talked about replication and LSD. Let's talk about random across research.
Okay. So I think the big question that farmers usually give us is they'll look at our research plots and they see this little plot of land, 4 rows, 30 feet long, and then they see all these little blocks. And they go, how can that relate back out to my farm? Or why do you do these research plots on such small land or pieces of ground? I want it out on my farm where you've got 20 acres versus 20 acres. Well, when we think of the variability that's across the land, soils change, the slope changes, you think about drainage, just fertility in general. There are so many variables out there that you can't always say when you put one treatment against another that there truly is a difference between the treatments. It may have been just the lay of the land, or maybe this piece of ground was more fertile. When we look at the small plots, we try to minimize as much of that variability, take it down to a small area so this block is similar to the next block to the next. So it's trying to take all those other reasons why a difference might be seen so that I can say with confidence that treatment A is really different than treatment B.
Well, that's a great explanation. And we've all been in rainstorms where we look out one window or out one shed door and it's raining aggressively. We look the other direction, only a few feet away, and it's not raining at all. So that would make a difference too, a large plot versus a small plot.
Yeah, and so when you think of the farm, and you go, well, I want to do trials on my farm. I want to make that comparison, and we do encourage that. Well, then you too should look at your land and see how it lays, or see these changes in slope, or see soil changes. I mean, we do soil tests, we do have soils maps. You can actually take a piece of ground or a field and go, what part of my field is the most uniform, and can I block my comparison in that area so that the rainstorm doesn't hit this side of the farm or it hits the other side of the farm. But maybe in this area, and maybe it is 10 acres that I can divide up and do treatments. But look at the land really strategically and say, where could I position it to rule out some of that natural variability? And then the next part we say, well, good, don't just split that 10 acres, repeat it several times. So if I'm comparing 3 different things, let's say 3 varieties, right, in that 10 acres, let's replicate it. Don't just put it in once or plant it once. Let's plant variety A 3 times across that, and variety B 3 times and 3 times or 4 times, whatever you have room for. But replicate it so that as it goes across that landscape, again, whatever result you get, you start to build confidence in that those numbers truly are different, and that if I were to do this again next year, I could expect the same kind of response.
So for your University of Minnesota plots and farmer plots, you're talking about statistics,
right,
and also something called least significant difference.
Right. And again, sometimes just explaining why we do what we do, folks think you're a little crazy, aren't you? But there's a reason behind it. Again, it goes back to, I want to be able to say with confidence, no matter what we're talking about. But when a farmer says, should I do this on my farm, or should I plant this variety, or should I use an insecticide, this herbicide, I want to be able to tell them with some level of confidence that, yes, this will pay, or no, it won't. Don't do this. And we talk about this LSD at different levels. Many times we use 90% confidence, or an LSD of, they call it 0.1 or 10%, 90%. And that just tells me that 90% of the time I am confident that if variety A went 200 bushel and variety B went 210 bushel, I can say 90% of the time with confidence that that variety B was indeed it did out yield, it performed better. If my LSD is, again, within that range. So there's 10 bushel that you see, 200 to 210. If my LSD happens to be 8, okay, well, 210 to 200 is 10 bushels, so that means, yeah, that is a difference. It's more than 8. If my LSD is 15, then there is no difference. And I would say, nope, 90% of my confidence that 200 versus 210 is not different. So that's a lot to think about, but again, going back to, I want to find the ability to say to you that 90% or 95% of the time that these differences are real, and I can take it to the bank, put it in my pocket, and know I'm getting a response. The LSD becomes a number that we can calculate with statistics that tells us what difference do we have to be confident. Again, is it 10 bushel? Is it 5 bushel? Is it sometimes 20 bushel, which sounds like a lot? But again, repeatability over and over, year in, year out, replication after replication, that I can with confidence tell you, indeed, these two really do vary, there's something real here, or no, it's just general random chance that these two might be 5 bushel difference numerically, but next year, maybe it would flip, and this one out yields, or it would flip here, or it would flip this way. It's all about, again, taking my money. Give you that example. If you spend $100 and I tell you 95% of the time you're going to come back with 110, you go, oh, I like those odds. But if I tell you take your $100 and only 20% of the time I'm going to come back with $110, only 20% of the time, you go, I don't like those odds, because that means 80% of the time I'm losing money. All right, so that's where the statistics and LSD, trying to find how much of a difference do I need that it really is going to pay me a return on my investment.
What's important, Lisa, when a farmer spends hundreds of dollars, upwards of $600 to $700 an acre, times the number of acres, we've got $100,000, hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line, and the margin that's left is what they use for family living, debt repayment, and moving the farm forward. So thank you for your research and being objective. We hope that farmers will reach out to your website and reach out for you for some research data.
That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Stay tuned for more on Farm Connections.
name is Bailey Thorson from Myrtle 4-H Club in Freeborn County. Today you will see my chickens that I will be taking for my 4-H project. Why I chose to take this project is because my family has chickens. The most interesting so far I have learned is the breeds, and showing animals takes a lot of work. You have to feed and water them. What gets me most excited is showing the animals and having fun at fair. I am Bailey Thorson from Myrtle 4-H Club, showing my chicken project.
Hi, my name is Macy Thorson from the Myrtle 4-H Club in Freeborn County. Today, I will be telling you a little about the Foods Project. You can take anything that involves food, like cooking or baking. This year for my food project, I'll try to make my own bagels. I chose this project because I like to bake and cook, then I can eat it. The most interesting thing that I've learned in the food project is to measure correctly when you are baking or cooking. What gets me most excited about the food project is you can eat your finished project. I'm Macy Thorson from the Myrtle Club, telling you a little bit about my foods project.
When faced with an uncertain economy, just paying the bills can become daunting. Developing a plan to tackle life's many obstacles can help to ease tension and get us through those lean days. I'm Dan Hoffman. Thank you for watching Farm Connections.